The logos rained down relentlessly. Before the gates of the stark white mansion, two figures huddled, soaked to the bone. An elderly woman, her silver hair plastered to her head, her tattered clothes clinging to her frame, sat hunched beside a bulging trash bag. Beside her, a young girl no older than 10, her small hands trembling, scooped up handfuls of wet, discarded rice, offering it to the woman. "Grandma, this rice is dirty." "It's all right, my child, as long as there's rice. There's still God's grace." The old woman offered a faint smile, then slowly, deliberately, lifted a few grains to her mouth. The little girl watched, tears welling in her eyes. They huddled together under the meager shelter of a small awning, sharing scraps of cold rice in the frigid downpour, silent, ashamed, yet somehow maintaining a thread of dignity. Suddenly, headlights pierced through the storm. A sleek, black Rolls-Royce came to a halt at the gate. A man in a dark, impeccably tailored suit emerged, his face a mask of disbelief. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. "My God, Mother Amara." He raced through the torrential rain, falling to his knees before them, embracing them tightly. His hands shook as his voice cracked with emotion. "Oh, why are you eating from a trash bag, Mother?" "What have I done, Mama?" Grace's frail hand reached out, gently touching his cheek, her own hand trembling. "It's all right, my son. We were just hungry. Even your trash smells sweeter than most people's meals." Her words, soft as a whisper, pierced his heart like 1,000 shards of glass. He broke down, his sobs mingling with the sound of the relentless rain. It was a scene that would have silenced the hearts of millions. Listen to the complete story, where tears become powerful reminders of compassion. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from: Lagos, Abuja, Nairobi, Accra, London, Toronto. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, so we can spread this important message. Never let your mother and child eat from a trash bag simply because you're too preoccupied with making money. Tunde Adebayo had once been the pride of Lagos. He started as a boy selling ice water in the bustling Balogun market, and rose to become the billionaire founder of Grace Mount Holdings, a multinational empire spanning real estate and fintech. People hailed him as the hope of Nigeria, the living proof that even a child born into poverty could reach the very pinnacle of success. But beneath the dazzling spotlight, Tunde was a man who had lost almost everything dear to him. At 35, his beloved wife, Chika, tragically died in a car accident on her way to deliver a birthday present to his mother. The devastating shock tore his world apart. She left behind a 5-year-old daughter, Amara, whose eyes held the same pure innocence and whose smile radiated the same gentle warmth as her mother's. Tunde vowed to himself, "For my child, and for my mother, I will remain strong." He threw himself headfirst into his work, painstakingly rebuilt his company from the ashes of crippling debt, and established a charitable foundation in his late wife's memory. By day, he was a titan of industry, a man of unwavering steel in the boardroom. But at night, he was still the devoted son who knelt to massage his mother's weary feet, and the loving father who read bedtime stories to his precious little girl. He held on to the unwavering belief that as long as love endured, life could still be whole. Then, one day, Adora entered his life, a beautiful, educated media specialist. She was instrumental in promoting his Grace for Children Orphan Outreach project. She was intelligent, graceful, unfailingly polite to his mother, and exceptionally kind to Amara, her gaze always filled with affection. When Tunde remarried 5 years after becoming a widower, the entire city of Lagos rejoiced with him. He genuinely believed that God had sent Adora to fill the gaping void in his heart. On their wedding day, Mama Grace clasped her new daughter-in-law's hands, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you for coming into our family," she said softly. "I need nothing more than Tunde and my granddaughter's happiness." Adora responded with a smile, the kind of genuine smile that convinced everyone she truly meant it. But, as they say, time is the only true witness to a person's true character. Initially, Adora seemed genuinely caring and attentive. She enthusiastically reorganized the house, hired a tutor to teach Amara French, and showered her mother-in-law with thoughtful gifts. Tunde, reassured, traveled relentlessly for business: London, Dubai, Singapore, New York, secure in the belief that his home was filled with warmth, love, and harmony. He was blissfully unaware that each trip he took was unwittingly opening the gates of hell for the two women he cherished most in the world. When Tunde was away, Adora's demeanor began to subtly change. She grew increasingly irritated by Mama Grace's traditional ways, by the fragrant, smoky scent of her native dishes, even by the sound of Amara addressing her grandmother in Yoruba. "This is Lagos, not Makoko," she said with a dismissive coldness. "We must learn to live like city people." She implemented drastic changes, separating the dining tables, locking the refrigerator, and strategically hiding the food. Their meals dwindled to meager portions of cold rice and a sprinkle of salt. On countless nights, Mama Grace secretly prepared porridge for her granddaughter, fearful that the clinking of the pot would rouse Adora. One evening, Amara bravely asked her grandmother, "Doesn't my stepmother love us?" She simply offered a weak smile. "It's all right, child. Even the rain must eventually stop." Meanwhile, Tunde diligently called every night, seeing the three of them smiling on the camera, believing his home was overflowing with happiness. He remained completely oblivious to the tears shed in secret, the silent meals eaten in the shadows. Once, Mama Grace even wrote him a letter, pouring out her heart, but she tore it up before sending it. She didn't want to burden her son with her troubles, and instead fervently prayed that God would soften Adora's heart. But the atmosphere in Lagos was growing increasingly ominous, and that fateful rain was simply waiting for a reason to fall. The Lagos night glittered with dazzling lights inside the opulent white mansion on Victoria Island. Smooth jazz music mingled with the delicate clinking of wine glasses. Adora stood regally in the grand hall, her crimson evening gown shimmering under the magnificent crystal chandelier. Surrounding her were the city's elite businessmen, renowned designers, and celebrated personalities. Their boisterous laughter echoed through the mansion, completely drowning out the sound of the relentless rain pounding outside. "Is Grace Mount Holdings really expanding into London?" someone inquired. Adora smiled radiantly, radiating pride. "Absolutely. Tunde is currently meeting with investors in Europe, while I, of course, am tending to our home." Everyone nodded approvingly, raising their glasses in a toast. Behind the closed kitchen door, Mama Grace and little Amara huddled together around an old, worn wooden table. Their dinner consisted of a single bowl of watery porridge with a meager dash of salt. The rich, intoxicating aroma of food from the lavish banquet drifted in, mingling tantalizingly with the sounds of music and laughter. Amara peered hesitantly through a crack in the door, watching her stepmother laugh brightly, her red lips glistening as she raised her wine glass. "Grandma, why doesn't Mommy eat with us?" the girl whispered plaintively. The old woman gently stroked her hair, her voice trembling with barely suppressed emotion. "Because she's busy entertaining our guests, my dear. When your father comes home, we'll all eat together again." But both of them knew that day felt impossibly far away. Since Tunde had left on his business trip, the entire atmosphere of the house had undergone a drastic transformation. Adora no longer cooked, and she no longer addressed Mama Grace as mother in her usual saccharine tone. Now, she simply referred to her as the old woman, and callously referred to Amara as that child. The housekeeper had been summarily fired for the grave offense of allowing Mama Grace to sit at the main dining table. Now, only the grandmother and granddaughter remained, living like mere shadows in the mansion's back kitchen. Each night when Adora threw her lavish parties, Mama Grace would quietly lead Amara downstairs, acutely aware of the potential embarrassment they could cause their hostess. One evening, when Amara had a persistent cough, the grandmother timidly requested a glass of milk. Adora glanced over and said coldly, "That milk is for the guests, not for country relatives." Mama Grace simply lowered her head and quietly walked away. That night, Amara lay nestled in her grandmother's arms and whispered, "Grandma, I miss Daddy. Does he know Mommy doesn't love me?" The old woman bit her lip, desperately holding back her tears. "Your father is simply busy, my child. But he'll come home. And when he does, he'll know everything." Those carefully chosen words of comfort were the only shred of hope she had left. Adora sank deeper and deeper into the shallow, glittering world of vanity. Each party was a new performance, a chance to shamelessly flaunt her status, to be prominently featured in the society pages, to bask in the fleeting glow of admiration. She had completely forgotten the humble kitchen that once smelled of smoke and laughter, or the innocent little girl who had once called her mother. All she saw now was her own reflection, a woman intoxicated by false glory. One night, as a party drew to a close, Adora overheard faint voices emanating from the lower floor. Mama Grace was patiently teaching her granddaughter a simple prayer. "Bless this food, O Lord, and forgive those who have hurt us." The heartfelt words made Adora's hands clench into tight fists. Pity transformed into irritation, and irritation rapidly escalated into simmering hatred. She descended the stairs, her voice as sharp and brittle as shattered glass. "No one needs those pathetic prayers in this house. If you truly want to thank God, then do something useful, Mama." Grace simply bowed her head and quietly replied, "God will understand." That night, Adora gazed into the mirror and saw a stranger staring back at her. Proud, cold, and utterly empty. But instead of stopping, she applied more makeup, chose a more extravagant dress, and desperately tried to conceal the profound emptiness with yet another layer of superficial glitter. Meanwhile, in the shadowed corner of the house, the two people Tunde loved most in the world sat shivering under a dim light, sharing a single bowl of cold, watered-down porridge. Outside, the rain fell ceaselessly, a relentless rain that seemed to whisper of an approaching storm. A storm not from the sky, but from a heart deeply betrayed. It was a damp evening. The Lagos rain poured down from the heavens without end. In the quiet of the business-class cabin, Tunde Adebayo closed his laptop and leaned back in his seat. He had just finalized the biggest deal of his career, and the first thing that sprang to his mind was his family. "It's been 5 months since I've had dinner with them," he thought, a gentle smile gracing his lips. He made the spontaneous decision to return home early, unannounced, hoping to surprise his mother and daughter with a little burst of joy. The sleek, black Rolls-Royce glided through the rain-slicked streets and came to a stop before the grand white mansion gates. The piercing headlights cut through the misty darkness, and in that single, devastating moment, his entire world shattered into a million irreparable pieces. Before him, through the swirling sheets of rain, his mother, Mama Grace, was bent over a trash bin, her trembling hands desperately digging through discarded food boxes. Beside her stood little Amara, her hair matted and tangled, her clothes completely drenched, her eyes wide with fear. She clutched her grandmother's hand tightly, whispering, "Grandma, please stop. I'm full. Let's go home before stepmom finds out." Tunde froze, completely paralyzed. His eyes widened in disbelief. His heart pounded violently in his chest. He simply could not comprehend what he was seeing. The mother who had once nourished him with her own tears, the daughter he had sworn to protect with his very life, now standing in the pouring rain, desperately scavenging for scraps of food in front of his own house. He threw open the car door and ran towards them like a man possessed. The rain lashed against his face, cold as shards of glass, but he felt absolutely nothing. He dropped to his knees, wrapping his arms around them, his voice breaking with anguish. "Mother Amara, what happened? Who did this to you?" Amara burst into tears, trembling uncontrollably as she pointed towards the brightly lit mansion. "Stepmom said I couldn't eat. Grandma came out here to find food for me." Mama Grace lowered her face, her tears mingling with the relentless rain. Her voice cracked and weak. "Don't blame anyone, my son. I just couldn't bear to watch her go hungry." Tunde held them even tighter, the crushing weight of guilt piercing his chest like 1,000 daggers. He shook uncontrollably, whispering, "What have I done, Mother? How could I have allowed this to happen to you? To my own child?" Inside the mansion, the lights still blazed brightly. Smooth jazz music wafted through the air, and from within came Adora's laughter, sweet and utterly false. "Welcome to our happy home," she said cheerfully, live streaming about her seemingly perfect life with her loving mother-in-law and adorable stepdaughter. Tunde turned towards the mansion, his eyes blazing with righteous anger. He gently lifted his mother onto his back, carried his daughter tenderly in his arms, and walked through the gates like an avenging storm. The rain streamed down his face, mingling with his tears. Each step he took across the wet marble floor echoed like thunder within the cold, heartless house. The housekeeper gasped in shock, dropping her tray of glasses with a resounding crash. "Master Tunde, you're home." He didn't respond, he simply said quietly, "Turn on all the lights. Tonight, I want to see everything in this house." He carefully sat his mother down on a chair, wrapped a warm blanket around her trembling shoulders, then gently placed Amara on the sofa. The little girl curled up into a fetal position, still sobbing uncontrollably. "Mommy, please don't punish me." Her words stabbed deep into Tunde's heart. From the staircase, Adora appeared, still radiant in her glittering red gown, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. She froze at the sight of Tunde, her eyes darting nervously to the drenched old woman and the shivering child. "Tunde, when did you get back? I was just live." "Stop." His voice thundered through the room. "Live streaming, huh? Telling the world about your perfect family, while my mother and daughter were eating from the trash outside my gate." Adora stood frozen in place, her phone slipping from her trembling hand and shattering into a million pieces on the unforgiving marble floor. Tunde stepped closer, his gaze burning into her soul. "Do you even know that my mother once starved herself, just so she could feed me? Do you even know that this little girl is my entire world? And yet you turned them into beggars in their own home." Adora trembled, backing away in fear, stammering, "I only wanted to teach them discipline." Tunde laughed, a hollow, broken sound that echoed eerily through the oppressive silence of the rain-soaked house. "No, you didn't teach them anything. You just taught me how utterly foolish I was to believe in a heart made of lies." The sound of the rain pounded relentlessly against the glass windows. The grandfather clock on the wall struck 11. White light reflected harshly off the marble floor, rippling through the puddles of water that dripped from the soaked clothes of Tunde, Mama Grace, and Amara. Adora stood frozen at the bottom of the staircase, her face ashen, her eyes darting nervously from side to side. Before her, Tunde sat upright on the couch, his shirt still damp, his face as hard as stone. His voice was low and firm. "Sit down." She didn't dare argue. The echo of her high heels on the wet floor sounded unervingly sharp. Behind her, Mama Grace held Amara close, both still trembling. Tunde picked up the remote control and pressed a button. The large screen on the wall flickered to life. Security camera footage appeared shaky and grainy, but mercilessly clear. He rewound the video. The first scene to appear was Adora, in a silk nightgown, holding a porcelain plate, hurling it straight at her mother-in-law's face. Crash. The plate shattered into a million pieces, rice scattering across the floor. Mama Grace stepped back in shock, one hand raised to cover her face, her voice shaking with fear. "My child, please. I just wanted to warm up some rice for Amara." Adora screamed, "Shut up. I don't want the stench of poverty in my kitchen." The next clip showed little Amara stepping forward hesitantly, holding a bowl of cold rice. "Mom, let me help Grandma clean up." Adora shoved her so hard that the bowl went flying, shattering on the floor. "Don't you dare touch my things." Tunde's knuckles tightened around the remote control, veins bulging on his hand. He forced himself to keep watching. The next image wavered, but it was unmistakable. Adora pushing both grandmother and child towards the back door, pointing disdainfully at a tray of leftovers. "Eat that? Or did you really think you could sit at my table?" Then a moment appeared that made Tunde's throat close in anguish. Mama Grace, kneeling down, holding the crying child close to her, whispering, "It's all right, my dear. We still have food. Thank God for that." Then she lifted her face towards the camera, her cloudy eyes glistening with tears, as if she was looking straight at her son through the lens, silently pleading for help. The hiss of the relentless rain outside blended with the ragged breaths inside the room. Tunde sat perfectly still, his hands white from gripping the remote too tightly. A single drop of water fell from his hair onto the table. No one could tell if it was rainwater or a tear. Adora bowed her head and broke down completely. Tunde, I'm so sorry. I just wanted to teach them how to live properly. I never meant to hurt anyone. He stood up slowly, each step heavy with despair. Properly? He said with a bitter laugh. You call throwing food at my mother proper? You call forcing a 10-year-old child to eat scraps discipline? Adora fell to her knees, desperately clutching at his hand. I lost my way, Tunde. Please don't leave me. Please. He pulled his hand away, his eyes hollow and empty. I once thought that poverty was the greatest fear, he said quietly. Then, looking at his mother and daughter huddled together, he added, but no, it's the absence of compassion that is the true hell. The room fell silent. The rain outside continued to fall, steady and relentless, but it could not wash away the weight of the truth that had just been revealed. Tunde switched off the screen and turned to his mother, his voice softening with tenderness. Mother, you don't have to cry anymore. Promise. Then he gently lifted Amara into his arms and helped Mama Grace to her feet. Before leaving the room, he spoke one final line, his voice low, heavy with sorrow. This house is no longer a home. The door closed silently behind them. Adora collapsed to the floor, staring blankly at the black, lifeless screen. The same screen that had just replayed the damning sins of her own life. That Lagos morning felt unusually cold. The sky hung heavy and gray, and the faint daylight struggled weakly to penetrate the drawn curtains of a once glorious mansion. The house was unervingly quiet. Only the ticking of a clock and the lingering smell of stale coffee permeated the air. Tunde Adebayo sat at the large wooden table, a blank sheet of paper lying before him. 3 bold words were printed at the top. Divorce agreement. The pen in his hand trembled slightly, not from hesitation, but because the pain he felt had reached far beyond the limitations of words. He looked down at the framed wedding photo beside him. He and Adora were smiling brightly, their eyes full of trust and hope for the future. Behind them, Mama Grace stood, clasping their hands, silently praying for their happiness. Tunde closed his eyes tightly. The memories of the previous night flooded back. His daughter's heartbreaking sobs, his mother's pleading voice, his wife's hollow face when the truth was finally exposed. Each painful memory carved itself deep into his heart, like the jagged edge of a broken blade. He signed the document. The pen moved across the page with strength and certainty. No anger, no hatred, only the unwavering resolve of a man ending a lie in order to save what little remained of his soul. When the ink had finally dried, Mama Grace stood silently by the door, her arm resting gently on Amara's shoulder. She said nothing, simply watched him with eyes that were both deeply sad and profoundly peaceful. Little Amara walked closer, placing her small hand over his. "Daddy, are we going home?" she asked softly. He knelt down, smiling through his tears. "Yes, my girl, we're going home to our real home." He rose, slipped off his wedding ring, and placed it on top of the divorce papers. The pale morning light reflected off the table, shimmering faintly, like a last ray of hope abandoning a dead marriage. Adora slowly descended the stairs. Her eyes were swollen and bloodshot, her hair disheveled. The silk of her nightgown was wrinkled and dull. She froze when she saw the papers lying on the table. You really want to leave me?" she whispered, her voice cracking with fear and utter despair. Tunde didn't look up. His voice was quiet, but unwavering. "I'm not leaving you, Adora. You left this family long ago." Adora collapsed to the floor, tears streaming uncontrollably down her face. "I was wrong. Please, just give me another chance. Just once." He finally turned to face her, his eyes filled with sorrow, but as cold as ice. "A chance is what you so callously took from my mother and from my daughter's childhood. I can't give that back." He said nothing more. Gently taking his mother's and his daughter's hands, he walked out of the house. A light rain began to fall, as if the heavens themselves were weeping, wanting to wash away what was left of such profound and unforgivable sin. The black Rolls-Royce rolled slowly through the gates. Its headlights cut through the early morning mist, illuminating the wet road ahead. Tunde glanced in the rearview mirror. The white mansion grew smaller and smaller, its dazzling lights fading into the distance, until it disappeared completely. He didn't look back. Inside the house, Adora sat slumped on the staircase, her trembling hands clutching the divorce papers. Her tears fell onto the spilled coffee on the floor, blending into a dark, blurred stain. She glanced around at the now empty house. The wedding photo lay face down on the floor. All the music, the laughter, the flowing wine, the dazzling chandeliers, the extravagant parties, all had vanished like a fleeting dream. Only the suffocating silence of guilt remained. Outside, Tunde gripped the steering wheel tightly. He didn't know what the long road ahead would bring, but he knew that he was finally driving in the right direction. Home, back to his mother, back to his daughter. Behind him, everything that was once his pride and joy faded into nothingness, like shadows after the rain. As the black Rolls-Royce pulled away from the white mansion, the Lagos sky slowly began to brighten. The night's rain had finally stopped, leaving behind puddles that mirrored the soft blue morning sky. Tunde said nothing during the entire drive. In the back seat, Mama Grace gently held Amara's hand and hummed an old lullaby, the same one that she had once sung to lull Tunde to sleep as a child. Weeks later, Tunde returned to Makoko, the sprawling slum where he had grown up. Among the narrow wooden walkways, the stilt houses still stood, humble, yet vibrantly alive. He stopped in front of a small, dilapidated home with a rusted tin roof. On the weathered wall, a faded sign still read, "Grace's Fish Stall." He smiled wistfully. This was where everything had begun, and where it would all begin again. Tunde bought back the house and painstakingly repaired it with his own 2 hands. No chandeliers, no marble floors, just simple wood, colorful fabric, and boundless love. Mama Grace replanted the small flower bed by the porch, filling it with bright, cheerful blossoms. Amara painted a vibrant mural on the wall, depicting the 3 of them holding hands beneath a shining sun. And every morning, Tunde rose early to cook breakfast for his family, the first meals he had ever prepared himself. One dawn, as warm sunlight spilled across the simple wooden table, they sat together around their small dining set. The comforting smell of hot rice, freshly fried fish, and fragrant ginger tea filled the cozy room. Mama Grace smiled at her son. "Your food tastes wonderful, Tunde." Tunde chuckled softly. "I learned from the best." All 3 of them laughed together, a bright, tender sound that seemed to wash away every lingering shadow of the past. Amara jumped up from her chair and ran to hug her father tightly, her eyes sparkling with joy. "Daddy, are we going to stay here forever?" He stroked her hair gently. "Yes, my little one. Here you'll always have Grandma, Daddy, and peace." Tunde placed his hand lovingly on his mother's shoulder. "Mom, I used to think that happiness lived in skyscrapers and billion-dollar deals. But now I know that a warm meal with you and my daughter is all I will ever truly need." Mama Grace looked at him with unwavering pride and warmth. She spoke softly, her voice like a gentle breeze rustling through the palm trees. "You went far, my son. You found success, but thank God you never forgot the way home." And so, every morning, when the first light touched the windows, the neighbors would see a simple, heartwarming scene. An old woman carefully arranging flowers by the front door. A little girl chasing a playful kitten across the porch. A man wiping down the table, carefully preparing breakfast for his family. No Rolls-Royce, no champagne, no glittering lights, only the quiet, enduring glow of love and gratitude. In the evenings, Tunde often took Amara to the old wooden pier that had once been his mother's fish stall. He pointed out over the tranquil water, his voice low and calm. "See that spot? I used to sit right there, dreaming of buying the whole world. But now, all I want is to buy more time. Just to sit beside you and Grandma a little longer." Amara wrapped her arms tightly around him, smiling brightly. Behind them, Mama Grace watched, the gentle wind softly brushing through her silver hair. She whispered a silent prayer. "Thank you, Lord. My son has finally come home." That night, the little wooden house glowed warmly under the soft, yellow light. Laughter drifted out into the darkness, mingling peacefully with the rhythmic sound of Makoko's waves. On the wall, written in Tunde's familiar handwriting, was a simple message. Home is where love resides, memories are created, friends always belong, and laughter never ends. The note, scrawled in a trembling hand, simply read, "I don't need a stepmother because having my mother and grandmother is already enough." From the moment Tunde Adebayo left that opulent white mansion, his life underwent a profound transformation. He ceased to be the solitary figure at the pinnacle of power, and instead became a son, a father, a man defined by compassion. He insisted on bringing his mother and daughter along on every business trip. Together, they explored Ghana, Kenya, Tanzania, and South Africa. Gone were the lavish five-star hotels and elaborate motorcades. Instead, there were just three simple souls seated together in the middle of a plain, contentedly sharing a warm, home-packed lunch and exchanging quiet, affectionate laughter as they gazed out the window at the world below. In the bustling streets of Akratunda, they were stopped by a group of orphan children singing their hearts out beneath the warm African sun. Tunde knelt down among them, listening intently to their stories of abandonment and hardship due to the relentless grip of poverty. Mama Grace gently took the hand of a small girl, tenderly wiping the dirt from her cheek. Her eyes filled with a soft, maternal kindness as if she were seeing her own child reborn. Amara, radiating joy, broke her biscuits in half, generously sharing them with the other children. And in that profound moment, Tunde came to a powerful realization. The world didn't need more towering skyscrapers. It desperately needed more hearts willing to kneel down in empathy and offer a helping hand. As a direct result of that eye-opening journey, he established the Grace Foundation, aptly named in honor of his mother, the woman who had once scrounged for leftover rice to feed her precious granddaughter. The foundation's mission was clear: to provide unwavering support to widows, abandoned elders, and orphan children across the vast continent of Africa. Tunde made a solemn pledge to donate 10% of Grace Mount Holdings' annual profits to ensure the foundation's long-term sustainability. The launch ceremony was held in Cape Town, within a grand hall bathed in soft, inviting light. Behind the stage, a banner glowed vibrantly, proudly declaring, "Grace Foundation, where compassion builds futures." Guests, journalists, prominent business leaders, and government officials fell into respectful silence as Tunde made his way to the podium. He wasn't wearing an ostentatious luxury suit. Instead, he opted for a simple white shirt and a gentle, welcoming smile. In the front row, Mama Grace and Amara sat close together, their hands intertwined, holding each other tightly as if afraid that their newfound happiness might somehow slip away. Tunde grasped the microphone, his deep, calming voice resonating throughout the hall. "Someone once told me that success means having everything," he began. "But now I know that true success lies in our ability to give something back." He paused momentarily, casting a warm glance toward his mother and daughter. The spotlight found their faces, now serene, proud, and radiant. "No one should ever allow their mother and child to eat leftovers," he continued slowly, deliberately emphasizing each word. "Because love is never something to be thrown away." A wave of thunderous applause erupted, filling the room. But Tunde simply bowed his head and gently took his mother's hand. Tears shimmered in Mama Grace's eyes as she whispered, "God didn't let you lose your kindness." From that day forward, the image of Tunde tenderly holding his mother and daughter on stage rapidly spread across social media throughout Africa, captivating hearts and minds. People began affectionately calling him the Billionaire of Compassion. But when asked about the title, he simply smiled humbly and said, "I'm not a hero. I'm just a son who once made his mother cry and is now trying to make her smile again." That evening, the three of them took a leisurely stroll along the picturesque South African shore. The sunset painted the horizon in vibrant shades of crimson. Amara picked up a small, intricately patterned seashell, carefully placed it in her grandmother's hand, and said, "Grandma, this is my treasure." Mama Grace smiled warmly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "It belongs to you, your father, and your mother, too," she replied softly. "All treasures from the great sea of gratitude." Tunda looked at them, his heart overflowing with a sense of profound peace. He knew that from this day on, no matter where life's journey might take him, he would never lose sight of the two remarkable women who had taught him the true meaning of unconditional love. 5 years had passed since that fateful rainy night that had changed everything. Nigeria had undergone significant changes, and so had Tunde Adebayo. He was no longer the cold, relentlessly overworked billionaire encased in a dark, forbidding suit. He had evolved into a symbol of compassion, a beacon of hope, and an inspiration for awakening. The poignant image of Tunde embracing his mother and daughter in the Lagos rain, captured unintentionally by a security camera that night, had spread far and wide across the world, touching countless lives. It was viewed millions of times, not for the ostentatious luxury of the Rolls-Royce, but for the raw, unfiltered pain etched on his face and the desperate, heartfelt embrace of a son who had realized, all too late, the true and profound meaning of love. That scene became iconic, immortalized by many names: the man who knelt in the rain, the embrace of redemption, the meal of devotion. Across Nigeria, it was proudly printed on the walls of schools, churches, and hospitals, serving as a quiet but powerful reminder. Never let the one who gave you life search for food in the trash. Tunda rarely spoke about the past, preferring to focus on the present and the future. He continued to wholeheartedly lead the Grace Foundation, traveling tirelessly across the African continent, building schools, providing essential care for the elderly, and opening classrooms for children living on the streets. And whenever someone asked, "Are you proud to be called the entrepreneur of compassion?" he would simply smile humbly and say, "I don't need a title. I just need to share a meal with my mother and my child." At the small, humble wooden house in Makoko, rain was falling once again that afternoon. But this time, no one was getting wet. Mama Grace sat peacefully on the porch, her silver hair glowing softly in the dim light as she watched the raindrops slide gracefully down the old, weathered tin roof. "Thank you, Lord," she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude, "for letting my son finally see." Amara, now a vibrant young woman of 15, carefully placed a tray of steaming food on the table. "Grandma, I cooked the vegetable soup your way today," she announced proudly. Mama Grace smiled warmly, her wrinkled eyes sparkling with pride. "My little one, you did well," she replied affectionately. Tunda walked in, dressed in his usual plain shirt, a symbol of his newfound humility. He sat down between them, carefully serving rice into 3 bowls, one for his beloved mother, one for his cherished daughter, and one for himself. 3 bowls, 3 smiles, 3 hearts that had once been broken and fragmented, now miraculously healed and whole, sitting together at one small, warm, and inviting table. Outside, the rain continued to fall gently, but inside the house, the radiant light of forgiveness and unconditional love shone brightly. Tunda looked at his mother and daughter, his voice filled with emotion, and said quietly, "Mom, I used to think money could buy everything, but now I know that sharing a meal together is worth more than all the gold in the world." Mama Grace smiled knowingly. "You walked through the storm, my son, just to understand the true value of the rain." Amara tilted her head inquisitively, asking softly, "Grandma, what is happiness?" Mama Grace looked at her with profound love and replied gently, "Happiness, my dear, is when you're grateful, even for a single meal." The 3 of them laughed softly, bathed in the warm, comforting glow of the yellow light spilling through the window. Outside, the rain drizzled peacefully, and the gentle waves of Makoko lapped softly against the wooden walls, creating a soothing lullaby of peace. There was no trace of sorrow or regret left, only the enduring light of gratitude, unwavering love, and profound redemption. Never let the one who gave you life or the one you gave life to pick up what you've thrown away. If you still have a mother, call her today. If you still have a child, look them in the eyes and say, I will never let you eat leftovers. Like, subscribe, share, comment where you're watching from. Lagos, Abuja, Nairobi, Toronto, London, Hanoi.